5. We screwed that up.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so Richard, I'd love you to tell me the story of how you got into this whole field of work. Was there a moment of inspiration, or was it something that emerged over time? So tell me the story of how you got into here.
Well, actually, it began as an accident, really. I'd reached a stage in my career where I was totally bored with what I was doing and realized that I'd spent most of my life thinking about personal transformation. And so I decided to write a book on personal transformation. And I read some Vedic philosophy that talked about different levels of consciousness. And um, I realized that these different levels of consciousness that were the Vedic philosophers were talking about really described different levels of self-actualization that Abraham Maslow had talked about. So I began to put together Maslow's hierarchy of needs with the different stages of self-actualization that you get from Vedic philosophy, and built the model, the 7 levels model. That was the first breakthrough. The second breakthrough was recognizing that at any level of consciousness, there are specific values which are important for that level of consciousness. And so I began to allocate values to the different levels of consciousness, and so that was the beginning. Then I thought, well, wow, if I can find out people's values, then I can measure where their consciousness is, and not only that, I can do that with organizations and groups. And so that's how it all got started. And that was way back in 1995, 96. So in 1997, I left the World Bank, where I'd been spent the last 2 years as values coordinator. I left the World Bank and started the business that we have today. And since that point in time, it's just grown and grown and grown.
So why values? Because within your system, values really form the center of the whole thing. Tell me more about why values.
Well, I recognize at an early stage that values are concepts that transcend a particular context. So we all live in the context of our community, our nation, our culture, or even in the context of our organizations. But so that beliefs that define those contexts, because beliefs are contextual, whereas values are concepts that transcend context. So I thought, well, if we can find out what people's values are rather than their beliefs, then we can use this methodology and these tools to map the values of people all over the world. And that proved to be absolutely true. And so that's why I decided to go with values. But there was several other reasons. And one of them is this, that over the past decades or the past century, life has got more and more complex, more and more quickly. There's been an acceleration in change. And so what I realize is that beliefs, when you make decisions based on beliefs, you're using information from the past to project into the future, assuming that the future is going to be very much like the past, but it's not true anymore. The the future is not at all like the past. It's constantly changing. So we need a deeper base for making decisions, one that aligns more at a deeper level with who we are, in other words, values. And so when you use values-based decision making, you're actually aligning the decisions you make with your true sense of self, what's really important to you.
And finally, since you talk about making decisions on past beliefs or values that can create the future, what's your sense of where this work is going and the future of organizations and of humanity?
Well, I think we were really ahead of the curve when I put together the company in 1997 and started doing leadership values assessments and cultural values assessments, because what we see nowadays is a huge focus on values. People are beginning to recognize that it is vitally important to get our values right. And we see this in the growth of democracy. Democracy is all about living values. The value, first of all, of freedom, equality, accountability, fairness, openness, transparency. All of those are fundamental values for living the lives that we want, not only in our community, but actually we want to live those values in our organizations too, because that's who we are. We want to live those values. And so there's a much greater values literacy now in the world than ever there was 20 years ago.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay.